everyone, it's Andrea again from Chronic Matters. I think that the first video I'm going to start with is probably the biggest question based on new attire. Not an earring, not a watch, but my oxygen. Why do I have oxygen? I haven't had oxygen in any of the other videos. And did something bad happen? And why? Most people you see these days don't have oxygen unless they're 80 years old or just came out of surgery or something. So why on earth am I wearing oxygen? That's the question that we're going to answer today. And it's a little bit complex because the questions and the answers surrounding my personal body aren't always the clearest. So this is going to be clear as mud. But the story starts out with me being embarrassed. I'm a registered nurse. I like to think I'm a decent nurse. My husband is a registered nurse, and he also agrees that he likes to think he's decent at his job as well. But there are times when you cannot see past the nose on your face. And I think sometimes when connecting the dots in medicine, we all fall into this crack of signs and symptoms might point to something, but it's almost too obvious that it can't be right. And what this basically means is chronically for the last, I don't know, year and a half since April of 2022, I have been going into respiratory distress and not really even noticing it. It started out with my diagnosis of POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and my heart rate rising to really high numbers. And the one problem was I didn't actually connect my respiratory rate, which is the number of breaths that you take per minute, with the rise and fall of my heart rate. And it's kind of silly, but it is what it is. So for a year, I have POTS, and anytime I stand up, my heart rate goes up. Anytime I try to do any kind of work, which really I'm using work as the simplest sense of maybe walking is the work. I'm not talking about like lifting kettlebells. I'm not talking about sitting at a desk all day. I'm just talking about like the work of living. So maybe you're, emptying the dishwasher, something that you probably mundanely do without much thought at all. And because those things are so mundane and you do them without much thought at all, sometimes you're not so aware of what's going on inside your body. It actually took my daughter's doctor to first tell me to assess for POTS in the first place. And I did that. And I found out, oh yeah, I do in fact have POTS. It took my resting heart rate from, 60 to baseline of 100 and higher from there. The component that I wasn't noticing as much was the fact that my respiration rate, so a normal respiration rate is between 60 and 20 for an average healthy, my age kind of person, up to maybe 30, 35, 37 breaths per minute. And that's not just a little bit of respiratory distress, it's quite a lot of it. And it's not that I would sit there hyperventilating. However, one situation came up in which case that was very obviously the problem. So we have a new dog in the house. You may have seen her pop in periodically from previous videos. I don't want to say her name right now because she's sleeping in the kennel, and if I say it, I'll either get the one guy or her all over me, and that'll be distraction. But she's a puppy. She has accidents. And so I needed to clean up 3 separate spots of urine. And I was doing limited work. So I'm not quite standing, but I mean, I'm in a position that's making my heart go at least 135. At this point, I'm on propranolol, 10 milligrams twice a day to try to slow my heart rate down a little bit so that I can have more participation in life. My 2 older children were with me in the home, and I had this spray bottle and my paper towel out, and I was cleaning up the spot. And after cleaning up the first spot, I was getting super diaphoretic, which is the medical term for sweating. So I was really, really clammy in the back of my neck, under my arms, down my chest. And I knew my heart rate was going very, very quickly, as I fully anticipated it would. But my son had said, "Mom, can you please stop cleaning?" And I said, "No, honey, it's not your responsibility to clean this. I'll clean it and we'll move on. It'll be fine. I just want to get it done." He kind of backed away slowly, and okay, Mom. I moved on to the next spot, and I'm getting quite dizzy, but I really only had like 3 spots to do, so I should be able to manage this, right? It shouldn't be that difficult. And again, my son said, "Mom, you don't look right." And he's not medically trained at all. He's 13 years old. And I kind of stopped and I went, "You know what? You're right. I am not feeling well at all. And I am running risk of passing out." So I did a self-assessment in that moment. So I found out that my heart rate was, around the 165, which is what I was anticipating it to be, and which it is a lot of the times, and I don't get necessarily the same response from my body. And then I realized, like, I'm breathing really heavily. I'm probably at least 30 breaths per minute, and I do feel like I'm going to pass out. And that's what kind of set the alarm bells off in my head. And I went, I'm going into respiratory distress. Okay, fine. I told my son, "That's it. You can take over and you can do the last spot. That's fine. I'll sit down." And I sat down and it wasn't coming back down. That's the difference, because normally when somebody overworks their body, it just comes back down to its baseline. So your heart rate will, come back down really quickly, and your breathing rate would come back down to that, 16 to 20. And depending on how healthy or unhealthy you are, it might take slightly longer for these things to happen. But ideally within 1 minute, your heart is slowed down and your breathing has come back within a normal range. And I was at 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and I'm still huffing and puffing. And I thought, oh, this is a problem. So I sort of started to watch myself over the next couple of days, and I realized, my goodness, Andrea, you're going into respiratory distress every single time you try to do something. You're just not paying attention to it. Like, I'm just pushing through my day, or I'm just, I just need to lay down now. And of course, once I take all effort off my body and lay down, I might feel unwell for 20 or 30 minutes, but I wasn't necessarily paying close attention to how much I'm breathing in that moment. And I certainly don't feel like I'm hyperventilating, because I don't feel like I'm going that sort of breathing, right? Like, to me, that would signal hyperventilation and going into this state of respiratory distress. But it's what was happening. It's just I wasn't breathing as loudly as I would normally see somebody present if they came to me in respiratory distress. It was more, I was breathing that quickly, but it was quite shallow. And so I started wearing my Apple Watch, and it can give some new information than it used to be able to give when I was wearing it at my job prior to getting long COVID and being off since April of 22. And one of those readings is respiratory rate. And so I went into the phone and it said that every single night when I sleep, my respiratory rate is getting up to 37. And I said to my husband, like, have you ever caught me breathing that rapidly in my sleep? Like 37 should be something you notice, you see. He said, no, I've never caught it. And I said, every single night for the last 7 nights, it has caught me between 35 and 37 breaths per minute at night. And of course, I'm asleep. I can't confirm this. I don't know if it's coming from a nightmare or what is happening. I have nightmares every single night. I've had them for years. I have severe PTSD and I'm allergic to Prazosin, which is the medication that you could use for intervention of nightmares. And so maybe that's the reason, right? But I also started paying closer attention during the day and when I was walking and what was happening to my breathing rates. And I became instantly aware that there was something very wrong with my breathing. And that's why I said, like, I'm kind of almost ashamed to admit that this had been going on for so long, because you know, I suppose when you wake up one day and everything in your entire world has changed, like, it was good if I could make it to the bathroom with my hearing and my vision intact at the beginning, that everything seems like it's almost gotten better, whereas my respiratory rate has very slowly gotten worse. I mean, I can't do any physical work without my body screaming no at me. And your lungs are a muscle. If you don't use them, you lose them. In fact, at that point, I became aware, like, goodness gracious, I haven't coughed in over a year. I don't remember the last time I coughed. And about a month ago, I got COVID again. And I didn't cough through the whole thing, but I felt like I needed to. It just wouldn't come out. And so around this point, I phoned my internal medicine specialist, who is a wonderful man, and he listened to me. And he's one of the only doctors that will actually take what I'm saying for face value. And he said, I agree. That's not normal. How about we have the respiratory therapist come into your home and do a respiratory therapy assessment on you for home oxygen? Great. So he sent that referral off, and you'd be amazed. I got a phone call the next day and he was in by that afternoon. And so he came over with a finger probe, and I said, like, you know, I have caught my oxygen saturation level, so the percentage of oxygen in my blood, at lowest 86%. If I walk from the master bedroom all the way through the house, down the stairs, grab a coffee, go out to the front deck or the back deck, sorry. I'm gonna go ahead and take my watch off because it's talking to us. Anyway, so I'll wind up outside and I would, you know, take my SpO2 and it was 86. So that's low. If I was, you know, the RN on scene for somebody having an oxygen of 86, I would give them oxygen therapy. But I can tell you that this isn't my norm. My norm is like 92, 93, 94, but the heart rate is super, super high, and it seems to kick in this increased breathing rate. And so the gentleman came over, wonderful man, stuck his professional finger probe on me, and it sat at 97, like pretty much the entire time that he was here. And I had my rehabilitation specialist, who I've been using, which I haven't talked about on this channel. She's a lovely lady. She now knows me very well, helps me get to appointments and that sort of thing, and has, you know, taken a huge weight off my husband. I had her come to this appointment because oftentimes she has looked at me and thought, gosh, you look not good. My lips would be blue, my fingertips are blue and white, and my feet, let's just not even talk about my feet. they didn't look alive. And so she wanted to attend this appointment. And I was sort of walking up and down the stairs and trying to get my body to go into respiratory distress, which I wouldn't recommend. They don't really need you to go into respiratory distress to believe you. But at this point, I have been gaslit so many times by so many different professions in this journey to get here that I'm like, he's not going to believe me unless I'm like laying dead on the stairs. And so instead, he actually asked me to stop trying to put myself into respiratory distress, and he believed what I was telling him about how my heart rate would climb, and then my respiratory rate would follow suit, and then I wouldn't be able to get my body to come back down as quickly as it should. So clearly I'm struggling. And then I showed him all the data that was corresponding in my phone and said like, and we got a problem with my sleeping because that's not right. And I said like, I've never been able to replicate it, but I know I need a sleep study. And he's like, yeah, we need to do all of these tests on you, which I will go ahead and say I've done at this point, and perhaps I'll make another video, because this one's already getting long, about the respiratory distress and the tests that go with it and what that looks like and everything like that. But for this particular video, he just said, you know, I'm not comfortable not leaving you with oxygen, which is kind of funny considering you can't get oxygen therapy at home from the Canadian government, even if you have congestive heart failure. They took it off of the paid chart. So people who have congestive heart failure, your heart and your lungs tend to like go hand in hand. So people who get COPD, they still are covered for oxygen therapy at home through the Alberta government and the Canadian government. I'm not sure which one pays for it, probably the Alberta government, but they took anything heart related. Well, mine is definitely, at least for at this point in time, what we would understand to be heart related. My heart rate goes up, then my rest rate follows, and then I just tank. And normally he would need a specific doctor's note saying oxygen therapy for home use. He would need something called an ABG, which is an arterial blood gas. So they pull it. Actually, I still have, you can't really see it, but I've still got like a little hole in my wrist from just having it done now, which gives them more information as to, you know, the pH in your blood, the percentage of oxygen in your blood, and all of like a lot of very concise, refined information. And you have to hit certain levels to fall into coverage for this. And home oxygen therapy is incredibly expensive, like prohibitively expensive. And he just said, I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable knowing that you're going into respiratory distress, even if your watch is wrong. You've watched it happen. This woman has watched it happen. I'm not comfortable leaving you without oxygen. And I said, fair enough. My, the gentleman, my internal medicine specialist who referred me, he had left early for the day, so he couldn't just write me a prescription, fax it over to the office for home oxygen use. And the respiratory tech couldn't technically write a prescription for it. So he said, well, we'll get the prescription tomorrow from your physician, but I'm going to leave you with oxygen tonight. And it has been life-changing to have the oxygen. When I started a medication for my heart, the propranolol 10 milligrams twice a day, it dropped my heart rate maybe 10 points. So nothing really significant compared to how quickly my heart was just trotting away. The oxygen therapy has completely stepped in and stopped the cycle of me going into respiratory distress. And it has brought, depending on the situation, depending on how many liters of oxygen I'm using in the moment and what it is my body is requiring, it has dropped my heart rate by upwards of 50 points per minute. And that was alarming to me, like absolutely alarming. I tried the first few nights to not wear the oxygen because they talk about like your body getting used to it and everything like that. So I was trying to kind of just use the oxygen therapy when I was moving, and it just, I felt so much better when I was properly oxygenated that I couldn't wake up every morning without it anymore. So I started wearing it overnight, and I have done my sleep study, but I'm waiting on the results of that. I didn't wear oxygen the night I did my sleep study, on account of getting like accurate baselines. Same with my tests at the hospital and my ABG, the blood gas and everything. I did all of that without oxygen, and I had it out of my system as long as I could tolerate before doing those tests, just so we had the most accurate representation of what my body's doing. But other than that, I've been using the oxygen overnight as well, and I have found that my body wakes up in less pain than it normally does, because if you're following this channel, you know I'm a chronic pain sufferer as well. My watch is reporting that while I'm still having tachypnea, so really rapid breathing overnight, it's not to the rate of 37. 37 is bad. I'm more around the 30 points now. So I'm not sure what's going to come back as a result of the sleep study. I'm not sure if it's going to say like my watch is accurate. I can tell you that the watch is relatively accurate to the finger probe for oxygen saturation levels. As long as I'm keeping my arm still and flat and it's like below my heart level, like I'm not, you know, putting my arm up in the air, because then of course you're going to lose the blood in your arm. The ability for my Apple Watch to read my oxygen saturation in my blood is almost 100% accurate to the finger probe that I have. So, you know, I'm getting better. I've had it for, I don't know. Turns out that my Blue Cross will pay for it. And again, like there are so many blessings in my personal journey to get back to health and wellness, even through all of these chronic things, that I just can't help but be thankful for where I am, because, you know, it's not about why me, it's why not me. I'm no different than anyone else, and I have as much chance as anyone else to go through all of these things. But every single one of the areas of my body is falling apart. However, most people do not have oxygen therapy covered through their insurance. I have so much coverage that my insurance company will pay for the actual equipment. Not only the rental in the interim, but the equipment itself, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So if someone is going to need it, I'd rather it be me, because I have I have the coverage, and that is just such a blessing. But it has made a huge improvement in my life, and I also have something called neuroendocrine tumors. We believe anyway, that are inside of me. It can cause respiratory alkalosis. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here in terms of if I make another video about the tests, like the details of the lung tests and the results. But basically, the little blood test that was done on my arm, they determined that I have something called respiratory alkalosis. So the pH in my blood is supposed to be between, so I'm so sorry if you can hear that dinging. I should have put it on silent before starting the video. Anyway, the pH in my blood is too high, and the carbon dioxide in my lungs is too low. And so depending on whether your oxygen is too high or too low, your carbon dioxide is too high or too low, and your pH is too high or too low, you can have a number of different conditions which would change the name. And if you look up respiratory alkalosis, you'll see the first treatment is oxygen therapy. So that's why I'm feeling so much better, is I have too little carbon dioxide. So the oxygen comes in, and because it has a higher presence in there, it holds back me expressing out extra carbon dioxide. Oftentimes people, when they hyperventilate, they blow out too much carbon dioxide, which is why they tell you to breathe into a bag. Because you're re-inhaling the carbon dioxide that you're breathing out in excess. On this list of reasons why somebody could be in respiratory alkalosis is low iron, which mine is fine, and tumors. And so in the next following videos, I'm going to be breaking down the rest of my health, because we're already at 25 minutes and I haven't even explained, speaking to the lung specialist. I haven't talked about what the actual tests looked like for, getting the oxygen. Even though I already had oxygen therapy, like the traditional way of going about getting oxygen therapy is you do all of these tests first. It's not normally the other way around. So I'll make more videos following up. But in terms of how did I come about even having oxygen, and why do I have oxygen now as opposed to not in the other videos, that's basically what happened. Is I realized I'm going into respiratory distress every time I try to do anything. And the amount of impact that this oxygen has had on my life is, I can't underestimate it. It's phenomenal. Oxygen therapy is very uncomfortable, and it's very drying of your mucosa. I have dogs and a toddler, and I'm forever being caught around my cord and like it yanking on my face, and it tries to like cut behind your ears. It's just, it dries out even your mouth. It's really uncomfortable. I use something called Sakaris, which helps if you're an oxygen user, just to add some extra moisture back. But and even my eyes, it dries out. It's unpleasant. And then of course, when you're out, you either have tanks that you're carrying with you, you've got cords you're tripping over inside the house, like it's just annoying. But I would put up with all the hassle in the world for how it's made me feel. I just have a little bit more pep in my step, and I had no pep in my step, and I couldn't trust my body to do anything. So that is where the oxygen therapy came in. My next video will be the follow-up of like what to expect when attempting to get oxygen therapy for yourself, if you believe that perhaps you're having the same issue with going into respiratory distress. What does it look like to go into respiratory distress, so that your family could notice it for you? Because when you go into respiratory distress, the first thing that shuts down is your brain. Like it shunts blood from your external extremities and just gets all of the extra oxygen that it can to your heart, which I was chronically living there. So like my feet are warm right now. They were never ever warm. They were ice cubes. They were painfully uncomfortable all day, every single day. There were nights where there were hours and hours I would lie awake just because of the severe pain in my feet. And I thought that I was getting I'm not diabetic. I mean, I've had every blood test under the sun, right? And an A1C is certainly a blood test I've had on multiple occasions, comes back perfectly fine. But my feet are acting like they have diabetic neuropathy. That's not normal, right? So that, like, if your feet are in that much pain and there is no blood circulation to them at all, then perhaps your body is living in respiratory distress. And I am wondering about a good chunk of the population with the POTS from long COVID. But It could also be from neuroendocrine tumors, which I will cover more in depth on this channel as well. But for now, I wanted to update why I have my friend. My friend doesn't have a name. I just call it the Oxygen, which is funny because I'm one of those people who likes to name my devices and cars and that sort of thing. But I'm going to leave it there. Put any questions you have down in the comment. If you want me to include any question you have in the follow-up video that I make, let me know. I can answer those questions too. But I'm eternally thankful for my Oxygen and my new friend on my face. So have a wonderful day, stay healthy, and remember to advocate for yourself. Because if I had not have advocated for myself, I would still be sitting here in excruciating pain, thinking that I needed a medication for my feet. And all I needed was Oxygen. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.